Hey y'all, this is Mary Ellen Slater. I'm the CEO and founder of RepCap and managing editor. And we're a content marketing agency that primarily works with HR tech firms. And today I am super, super excited to introduce my friend Viola Eva, who we have worked together on many, many projects together. And if you've been on my webinars before, when you hear me talk about weird content, this is the Viola who talks about what do we do with the weird content. And so real quick about me, I am a former journalist turned content marketer. I used to work for the Washington Post many years ago. I wrote a career advice column, which I mainly bring up just to point out that I've been writing about the future of work now, apparently for the majority of my career. I have a master's degree in journalism, and I have my original undergrad is actually in agronomy, which always people find a little head scratching, but if it makes you feel better, my minor was religious studies. So Viola, why don't you introduce yourself right quick?
Perfect. I'm so excited to be here. Love us working together. I love being on a webinar with you. Excited to learn from you today, Mary Ellen. I run a digital marketing agency specialized on search marketing for SaaS. I would say in the world of SEO, I'm a pretty content-driven SEO, content strategy-driven SEO, very inspired by all the things that you do. And ended up in SEO accidentally because my degree is actually economics. But I think it somewhat makes sense because we also have several folks with finance degrees in our team. And so I think someone who's loving spreadsheets, data analysis, big VLOOKUPs, I think there is somehow a natural progression into the kind of like data-driven ways of SEO. So yeah, excited to share today how we've been thinking about SEO and AI and learn from you as well.
Yeah, that's probably a whole other webinar like that we could have about if people say, well, I don't use your degree. And I'm like, every day. Y'all, I took 21 hours of statistics. Like, I use my degree every day, just not in the way you think. It's not that literal, guys. All right. So what are we going to talk about today? So one, we're going to talk about what Viola calls the AI content hype cycle. And I think we've all lived through it in the last essentially year and a quarter or so. We're going to talk about the part that I'm super interested in digging in because this isn't quite my area, but it's Viola's. So I'm going to be learning some things about AI-powered search and LLMs and the way that it's even changing. What does it mean to optimize for this like anymore? Like it's all very different. Then we're going to talk about content production in AI. And I'm going to tell y'all like what the real risk is of your AI content, because it's not what you think it is. We're going to talk about thought leadership and point of view. We're going to talk about like how this is maturing. And then the last bit, we're going to talk about how do you actually measure success in this AI powered zero-click voice results world, because it's about to get even weirder. So, all right, I'll let you talk about this hype cycle.
So this is typically the kind of like technology hype cycle that talks about technology adoption. And I like pulling that up for kind of like trends that we see in digital marketing. So it basically starts with a technology trigger. And for the sake of this conversation about content marketing and content writing, I think that a technology trigger happened late 2022, early 2023, when ChatGPT and co all of a sudden got good. I know there was GPT-3 before and all that, but it just wasn't quite there yet. I think that like where everyone all of a sudden started listening, becoming interested, writing with AI was really about 1.5 years ago. And so that's a kind of like technology trigger. And I think especially early 2023, you know, there was a huge competitive advantage for early adopters. If you were the only one pumping out AI generated content, you were just a lot more productive. You had a higher volume of content than everyone else. And you actually been rewarded by it, especially by Google. Google does not punish AI generated content up until recently. You could rank extremely well. Some big players were doing it. I've talked before about LinkedIn pumping out tons and tons of AI content and being rewarded of it. And so there was this kind of like, you know, we're all writing with AI kind of like frenzy early last year. And I think now it's also timely that we're speaking in March 2024, because for the sake of Google, Google just released 2 algorithm updates in March that specifically tackle spam, low quality, unoriginal, and AI generated content. And so a lot of sites that were claiming big SEO highs, big, you know, programmatic AI plays just saw their traffic tank in the last 3 weeks. And what's very interesting is the language unoriginal versus original content, which is not really a language that Google has used in that way before. And so we can see that kind of like unique stand, point of view, all that stuff is getting really, really important. And so everyone who just had their SEO site tanked is obviously pretty disillusioned and sad right now. But that's not to say that this is the end of AI in content marketing. I think it's an unrealistic expectations that we're not using these tools, that we don't want to be more productive. You know, the ship has sailed, you know, and it's AI is here to stay. It's making us more productive. And so now I love what you've been saying, Mary Ellen, is like this year is the year of operationalizing, maturing our AI use. Like last year was the year of experimenting in a frenzy, and now is the year of professionalizing and maturing. And it's also the new normal of having these AI tools in our workflow. So that's kind of what I see for writing. But just keep in mind, the same thing kind of happened for AI for outreach, AI for LinkedIn comments, AI for images and videos. Like we're always going through a similar kind of like timeline and process.
Oh, I think that the multimedia piece, like, so I do a little workshop, and actually, if it's virtual, I split it into 2 sessions because people don't need all that in one sitting. The second half is all about multimedia. And because I think what all my writers, my copy people experienced over the last year is currently what is happening if you are a designer or a video editor. And so I would just say, if you are not enthusiastically playing with the AI tools right now, like you need to get in there. Like I'm going to assume anybody listening to this webinar right now is interested in this, but you mentioned AI for voices, you know, things like when we produce podcasts, we're able to create a dub of your real voice so that if we have to punch in something, we don't have to go back to you and bother you. Y'all, that's actually a big deal, because it's not about making the whole podcast. Like making the whole podcast in a fake AI voice is stupid and like defeats the point of podcast. The making, using a little bit of AI to punch in where you flubbed your words so that you can save yourself the time of having to re-record something and so you can get out to market faster. Beautiful.
Magic.
Beautiful. That is brilliant. That is brilliant. That other thing is dumb. This is brilliant, right? Because it's about human. My rule for this is like, use your AI to get closer to your customers, not further away. Use it to be more humanity and like more of that human stuff. And so I think as you're thinking about these tools, think about it that way. You know, video, you know, we are using AI to do initial cuts, like out of videos. Like it's getting better and better. When I realized that, Riverside's AI, like little magic clips thing was smart enough to follow a person around on a stage, like that. Okay, guys, like, like this is real. So some of this is the hype. Like this is real. This is very real. So,
and I like that quote here from Insight Partners that I think several clients have sent that presentation to me in the beginning of the year. It was one of the CMO coffee chats that they did, but this idea like this is a market inflection perhaps profoundly bigger than the rise of the internet, mobile, public cloud. You know, this is a generational shift and a total game changer. And so, yeah, 100% agree on that. I thought I set us up maybe talking about AI for search specifically. And I think there's 2 major dimensions in which I want to think about this. The first dimension is AI-powered search and large language models. What I mean by AI-powered search is, for example, Google wanting to have a chatbot on top of their search results called Search Generative Experience. But I also mean by that, you know, the Bing equivalent is already live with ChatGPT. But I also mean that people are now searching on ChatGPT, on Gemini, on Perplexity AI, etc. So the first thing to consider is that what we consider SEO success, you know, that one organic blue link that's ranking in the top position, we need to redefine what search success means, because that one blue link is pushed very far down below the fold. And we don't know the exact impact this is going to have on click-through rate, but I'm very sure it's going to be a decrease in click-through rate just because the classic organic search result is now so far down. And so figuring out like, what does that mean for the type of content that we produce, but also how am I going to be part of that chatbot answer? And even more so, how am I part of the chatbot answer with the right stuff? Because we've seen client that they're part of the chatbot answer, but it pulls up some old branding and messaging from 2 years ago, because guess what? 80% of their website is still about that, but the homepage is updated. And so making sure you're part of the chatbot answer and you're also part with the right stuff is kind of the mission that we've been on over the last 12 months.
I want to give you an example of that, actually, why this is also one of my rules as a journalist. When I hear people say they're using ChatGPT and other similar search like for fact checking, it is terrible at that. Okay. It's a probabilistic model. You got to remember how these things work. It's a probabilistic model. So that's why it's surfacing that old stuff, because it's older and it kind of gives it this reputation. And just to give you a brief example, like we have a client who's a thought leader, a book author, has built a little GPT. It's actually very cute. And what he's doing is it's experimental, very forward. I'm really enjoying it. But as he was testing it and poking holes in it, it was great. And like, if you asked it what to think about, like some topic that he had written extensively about, it was aces. If you asked it what about his book, it gave a very catastrophically, bizarrely incorrect answer, because there isn't actually a single blog post about the book. There's a page, there's a mention, but like if I'm an LLM and I'm evaluating the web content, like probabilistically, like I don't see any. It made up a book. It just made up a book. So that's the kind of limitations that we have to keep in mind. So if we care about the truth, like that's why it's worth investing this and make sure you adapt your content to this, because otherwise, like lies win. Like lies will win. So
yeah, lies, old stuff that you maybe mentioned in passing, but you didn't want it to be the main message, etc. Like the stuff is kind of getting surfaced. And so this is then where that's kind of like the second side of the coin when we think about AI and changing workflows for SEO and content, is how do we use AI tools in our content creation and content marketing? I think what we noticed over the last 12 months is very repetitive. The internet gets flooded with same AI content. It's very copycat, very boring stuff. And so what we really need is originality, especially now that Google has kind of confirmed that with us. And if you think about it, is Google kind of has to do that because it's not in the interest of Google of just surfacing AI generated results. It's maybe still fine this year, but think about it 2 years down the line when we, being surfaced AI content was generated from AI content that was generated for AI content. And so Google kind of like needs to catch up with this because they need to stay relevant as a search engine, because otherwise people turn to YouTube, TikTok, ChatGPT, Perplexity. They're already doing that. But the worse the search results get, the more they're going to turn to other search engines. And so whilst we do want to be effective and whilst we do want to produce more content, we just have to be aware that it's not in your interest and it's also not in Google's interest, just having more and more of the same stuff over and over again.
The other thing I want to note here is a lot of this pressure. There's an interesting tension right now where, content creators who are often drawn to that work because they like to make things, right? You become a writer because you like to write things. You become a designer because you like to design things. You have that maker kind of gene and you're good at it, right? I almost feel like the better you are at your job, like the more highly skilled you are as a technician, as a creator, the harder this transition has been. Yeah. Like if you were really good at making things, so we're getting this people above us who only kind of sometimes don't really even understand the processes. They're saying like, well, why are we paying for SEO posts now? Like we should be able to make 10 of these. Why are we only posting once a week? Give me 20. But what I'm going to tell you is that I would say these tools have changed the way I work. It has not translated into any less work for me. My work hours have not reduced. The things I'm spending my time on are different, but the expectations coming from non-content people, I think that's something we're going to have to continue to manage, because there's definitely some perceptions you may already be running into where your CEO or even your CMO, depending on the size of your organization, somehow think this is magic and that you should just be able to type some words, that you don't need writers anymore, that why can't you publish 10 things a day? Like one, you don't want to. And two, it doesn't really work that way.
And I think especially the last year, right, in our space, SaaS and HR tech, there's it was a turbulent year. There's a lot of layoffs, a lot of budget cuts, and then at the same time, the rise of AI. And so I think for many people, it seems so natural. And it's like, oh, we can. And we can. We'll talk about using them, but it's just not a 100% change.
So I actually want to add something. Even go back to your hype cycle, because I think one of the things that happens too is people sit down and they start to use the tools and they do the basic thing, and they don't get good results. If you're a great writer, you're a great editor, and you make your prompts and stuff comes out, and you're like, ew, and then you never touch it again, right? Like we all kind of did that, and then now you're like, okay, this is what I have to do to get good stuff here. That's part of your own personal hype and adopt. But just know the first thing you got from your first prompt is probably going to be terrible. Anyway, so, all right. So how do we rank? Viola, I'm making
100%. 100%. So let's talk about the mental model that I'm currently using, which is this idea is, let's say before, it's kind of like a classic search result you can see on the left side. You type performance management software, we have that panel of different tools. We can see who's there: Performia, Bamboo HR, Culture, M155, BetterWorks, Review Snap. And then after, on the right side, we have from Google Labs, where you can test search generative experience. We have the result, same question, right? What are the kind of like best performance management software? And we can see they don't return the same stuff. So for example, LeapSum is in the AI answer. It wasn't there before. The positions are differently. Deputy, SAP SuccessFactors wasn't mentioned before, etc. So that's kind of like the struggle here, that even for some like keywords, the results might be very, very different.
Some of these aren't right. Like some of these are not performance management tools. Right? Yep. Like, isn't that interesting? So again, you shouldn't trust this. Like the old way is more trustworthy.
Yeah.
These other things are real. Like this is made up.
So the question is, how do we make sure that both Google and by extension, large language models understand us, that they understand what category are we in, what type of software are we, what are our use cases? And so a good way to think about this is the concept of entity, which means that it's a uniquely identifiable object in the kind of like universe of language and concepts that we have. And so an entity can be a place, it can be a person, it can be an organization. And you want to increase the likelihood of both Google and LLM understanding you. So let's look at an example of an entity in the wild. First, kind of like my favorite one is Rey, is the female lead character of the latest Star Wars. So when we search for Rey on Google, Google understands extremely well that there's Rey the character that's played by different actresses. What are the movies, you know, that character appeared in? And then it also understands well the relationship of this character, you know, who, what's her personality? Is she a Jedi? Who's her boyfriend, etc. So we can kind of understand, Google kind of like connects the dots on this entity very well. There's the entity Rey, there's the entity of the two actresses that play her, there's the entity of the movies. And maybe more relatable, if you're looking to find an email marketing tool, it's very likely that MailChimp will make it on the list of software that you're considering because they're really everywhere. They have a huge knowledge panel on Google search. They're part of the recommended software tools. Even in the people also ask, it doesn't just ask what's the best email marketing tool. It straight away asks, is MailChimp best for email marketing? So Google has a very tight understanding of MailChimp is about email marketing. If we want email marketing, go for MailChimp. Might be a bit different. If we type ConvertKit, we can say that, see, Google is not quite sure. ConvertKit, the LLC, ConvertKit, the software company, how does it relate? Drip, also a competitor, has an even harder time. We can see, you know, Drip Inc., outdated logo, very short knowledge panel, also confused with the slang word. And so what we're trying to do is we're gonna try to increase that entity understanding in the aim to be better understood by Google, but also by LLMs. So what that means is it doesn't just matter how you talk about yourself on your homepage, you know, your product pages, these key pages that you're putting so much love and energy in. It also matters, what is all that other stuff that's already been on your website? And then also, how do others talk about you, and where do they mention you, and where else are you featured? And I'm always like laughing about this a little bit, because what we're doing now reminds me a lot of kind of like local SEO. Mm-hmm. So if you wanted to be ranking for Plumber Berlin, you historically had to do all of that work of like updating the yellow pages and, you know, all these directory listings. And I think in a way that process is coming back to us, because we want to make sure that every place where we're mentioned or featured, every place where other people talks about us, there's an alignment. And so with the author, you know, if people talk about the author, you want them to mention the book, and you want them to mention the book in the right way. If they talk about your software tool, you want them to talk about with the right software category that you're currently part of. And so the green ones are kind of pages that you can control very well. Your own homepage, product pages, blogs. You can do content pruning, auditing, rewrites. the kind of like neon yellow ones should also be in your control, right? Your YouTube, your LinkedIn, your Crunchbase profile, make sure they have the same category, the same description, whom are you for? The orange ones are already getting a little bit trickier. With the G2, Capterra's Trust Radius, you own the description, but you don't necessarily own the content of the reviews, but you can kind of like work towards getting more up-to-date reviews. And then there's the things that you're less in control of, like mentions on news websites, podcasts, appearances, listicles. Like this is where we're getting into more the PR territory. But ultimately, in order to be represented well, and in order to have a neat entity understanding like the Star Wars character has or like Maintop has, you want to make sure that these are aligned, that they're telling the same story, and that you're connecting the dots. And that doesn't just mean cleaning it up. It also means using some schema markup, which is a piece of code that will allow you to communicate that in a way that Google and machines can understand it. And so you want that alignment across the entire web, everywhere where people talk about you. And you want to get these relevant features and mentions as well.
Can I mention something here? Because this actually dovetails with something that you and I have been chatting a lot about, offline. When you go do things, I love this as somebody who thinks in an integrated, holistic way about marketing. It's like the things that we do, like when it makes PR matter more again, right? Like, I mean, I think there was a time when that was considered a brand awareness, and it was treated like it was in this bucket of, well, it's great, but it isn't going to really drive anything. But like when you go on someone's podcast, when you have a podcast, it is now going to influence your search results. Like this is about your SEO. Like it is telling those other little appearances and like those mentions. I just want to make sure that everybody kind of absorbs this for a second. Like this is a universe. This is a whole little ecosystem about you. Like you cannot treat SEO does not mean what is on my website.
Yeah, 100%. And to that point, that's why I wrote the little smiley face there is SEO is used to frown on a homepage link. They're like, we only want keyword optimized, targeted, anchored text to our SEO page. I still want that, by the way. But homepage links are a good thing. Mentions are a good thing. If you want to rank for performance management software, be part of the listicles that list performance management software. And, have your review site talk about this, etc. Like that alignment is really crucial because what the chatbot answer the search generative experience from Google does, it doesn't just go to your homepage, reads through the homepage and says like, oh, it's clear that's what these are about. It stitches together its answer based on several sources. And so if like 90% of these sources are outdated or talking about you in the wrong way, it's going to come out in the wrong way because it's just not going to take just that one
have that podcast where you talk about performance management and make sure it's distributed on Spotify, on YouTube, on like, that's why it matters. Like, anyway, go ahead.
Perfect. Yeah. So what are we doing? We want to connect the dots between your website, socials, features and press mentions. You want to claim your knowledge panel, that big thing on the sidebar. And you also want to become a credible source. And so I put here a screenshot of, if you ask Google, should I work with Viola for SEO? It writes a pretty favorable review. Thank you. But you can also see what it kind of like pulled this from. It pulled this from our homepage. It pulled this from some of my author profiles. It pulled this from my LinkedIn. So if I'm having the right stuff in these places, I can not control, but I can steer these chatbot answers towards displaying the right type of stuff. So we'll talk a little bit about measuring this towards the end of the presentation, but it's just important to know that when we talk about appearing in the Google chatbot answers or other AI-powered search, unfortunately, being currently in the top positions is helpful, but does not guarantee that you're going to be represented well in the chatbot answer. And even if you do, it's going to pull in other sources as well. So we've been doing a lot of work, kind of like brand audits, review site audits, social profile audits under that lens, making sure that they're all up to date. Do have a homework, rewriting our own LinkedIn company page, because I noticed I haven't done this in 2 years. And I'm like,
I don't have a knowledge panel.
But it is.
I play my own knowledge panel. So
no, if you want one, a nice schema markup will help for sure. Any kind of like additional thoughts on the topic of ranking in AI powered search?
Yeah, I guess quick questions before we move over to look at that too. Questions from the audience. And we can save them for the end. But no, I think I really actually love the way this is going in some ways. In other ways, I don't like the idea that like we've lost some of the verification around this, you know, that there is this like, guys, this isn't a fact checker, you know, like I don't like that. That sets off alarm bells for me, but I do love the way that it is more holistic. I do love the way that it does kind of create this picture. It makes it harder to game, frankly. Like if that's one thing, but I also appreciate that. Like in the long run, I know it's painful to make this content, but like it means you need to play in a bunch of different formats. It means you need to play in different places. It adds like, it just, I don't know. I don't know. I like it. The way my brain works, like actually really likes the fact that it's harder for you to come in and shape a false narrative, you know, like it's tough. Like I think, but I need to go claim my knowledge panel. That's
yes.
It's like, oops. And then
yeah, definitely do that. And
yep.
I think Helene from my team is here as well. Let's definitely do some stuff for you, Mary Ellen.
All right, let's talk about the actual content. So again, you mentioned that you're a very content-focused SEO person, and I'm a defender of SEO and thought leadership as veritable concepts. So that's why we hang out. But let's talk about what it means to do content marketing in this world. So my first question for you, is AI actually against Google's guidelines?
It is not. It has not been, and I don't think it will be. Google is now talking about disclosing AI content. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, putting a badge on the top of your article saying something like generated by AI, edited by such and such. It is not forbidden. It has not been forbidden. And I don't think it will be because, again, it's kind of like the nature that we're going to be using these tools now. But what Google dislikes and has always disliked is kind of like the low quality, spammy, keyword stuffed content. And so the new language that they're now using is this idea of like unoriginal content. Before, they've usually talked about low quality, keyword stuff, content that's been written for search engines first. And so now they talk a lot more about people first content. Like, do you have actual experience and expertise to talk about that? Can you demonstrate that? And so what's happening now as Google is, punishing so many websites in March of this year, it's not that they specifically punish AI content websites. They punish low quality and spammy websites, which many of these happen to be AI generated, which is kind of the nature of the beast, right? If you do a cheap AI prompt, you're getting a cheap SEO article. And one comment on that is, I don't think that that SEO content necessarily has been great before. Like, I think SEO as a discipline always had that habit of kind of like repeating what's already there. And so I'm not necessarily saying everything was better before or they're doing something significantly worse than SEOs did before. It's just at such a scale. And so what Google has said for March is that they identified kind of like low quality, unoriginal content in the search results, and they're going to reduce this stuff by 40%. And so when you're seeing drops on LinkedIn right now and Twitter, that's what people are talking about, that these sites got wiped out.
There's a good question here, actually. Let's pause for a second when we go to that one. Paul said, that's my concern, the ethics of AI as it relates to content transparency. Should AI-assisted content be identified as such? And I have an answer to that, but I would like to hear yours first. Should we label it?
So Google is interested in us starting to do that. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about when and how we're using it and how to use it in an effective way. But Google is getting more interested in us disclosing that.
My answer to that is frankly more pragmatic. Like, how would you? How would you? Because if you have Grammarly, if you have Google Docs, if you have a spell check, if you're searching for content online right now and you're looking for information, I don't believe that it is possible right now, short of like sitting down with a piece of paper. You're going to have to get off of the internet if you're going to write content without AI. Because one of the most important things I think has happened, we are still kind of in this mindset of thinking AI content creation is something we go over and do, right? That we log into ChatGPT, we log into Writer, we log into Lately, and we're making this explicit decision to use it. when the reality is AI is now in every tool that we touch. There's AI in this webinar platform, right? Like there's AI. You just used AI to send me that chat, like, you know, like to some degree, right? It's like it's touching everything. So what is the threshold for it? Like, when do we flag it? Like I think that's a more complex question, but I don't think we can say anymore.
And Google cannot either. I know last year a lot of the discussion was around AI detectors. And so we spent some time, we did human written content, AI written content, and we fed it through a lot of AI detectors and we compared it side by side. And what would happen is you could put one article through 5 detectors, and then 2 would say this is human, 2 would say this is AI, 2 would say it's half and half, and it would have nothing to do with what it actually was. It would say AI content is human. It would say human content is AI. But I think what people talk a lot about is not necessarily the writer that's crafting a blog post with the use of like writer and the stuff, but a lot of stuff people have put out like at large scale and having more transparency around that.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the interesting piece here. So let's jump on over. And we do have some more questions, but I want to get us to the risk.
Yeah,
so people often talk about the risks of using content, like using AI to create the content, and it is so misunderstood. Like people are worried about, we're all very worried about privacy, and they're worried about security. I mean, those are certainly considerations in some types of content. The real problem is that your content is boring, right? If you are using this tool, AI will give you like off-the-shelf prompts. Like if you just sit down and talk, it will give you the average of the internet. And I realized that for half of you, that is an improvement. The other half of us, like if you were a really good writer, you're going to look at that and be like, ew. But it's like a flattening, right? So, but it makes things very generic. It makes things very boring. Okay. And it doesn't, that's the real risk. That's the risk. That's your more likely risk. And Viola, what is the goal of content marketing?
Exactly. Just wanted to kind of like put that out there again. Is like the goal of content marketing is we want to be remembered. And this really matters because when we talk about keywords like performance management software, that's great. But that is that part of your total addressable market that's currently actively buying. And then there's the other 95% that might not be buying today, but they could be buying and they will be buying in the future. So when they get ready to buy, you want to be part of those brands that are part of their consideration set, that they remember, that they're putting on the list, and then say like, performance management, I think there's like these 3 top players. I think we should look at them first. And so who doesn't get remembered is the same copycat content. But what we want to be memorable, and we want to create these touch points, and we want to make sure they build some mental availability for us in the right way. And some sort of AI generated LinkedIn comment or blog post is not getting you remembered in the way that you want to be remembered, if they even remember you.
And they won't. So they will not. Oh, I think I went too far. Okay. So people first content. What do you mean when you say that?
So when Google talks about this is this idea is, you know, what is your existing or intended audience, and being very, very clear on that. And then also, this is interesting, is this idea of like firsthand experience. And so when Google talks about trustworthiness, for a while, they have talked about expertise, authority, and trust. And then kind of like with the rollout of all these AI tools, they've added another E for experience on this. Now, don't get me wrong. We all hate these Thai cooking recipes that start with like, once of the time I was backpacking in Thailand, and like 2,000 words later, you're finding,
dead, right? This is dead.
You're finding the recipe. That's not what we're talking about when we mean experience, but it's this idea. It's like, based on your knowledge of the market and the industry, you know, how can you bring examples from your customers, industry statistics, an interesting narrative to that shows that you actually know what you're talking about. And for example, every marketing article ever written starts with define your target audience. It's been said so often, no one even knows what that means anymore. This does not show like expertise. Like expertise shows maybe like, whom are you talking to? How are you conducting these interviews? Like, how do you make sure to actually extract meaningful insights? This is how you can show that you have expertise in defining target audience. And so it's kind of like going that extra step and sharing that. And so again, I'm stoked about this. I'm stoked about originality. I'm stoked about the people first content. It doesn't mean we should neglect some SEO best practices. You know, you still want a neat URL structure and all that stuff, but it just means that the overall emphasis is a lot more on content experience and staying memorable, which personally, I find that a huge relief.
Mm-hmm. I was just thinking too, when you talk about being original, an example of what that would mean is like pull like a Brett Starr. Basically, it's like instead of the article that says starting off with like, you know, first like understand your target audience, it's like, nah, screw your target audience, right? It's like say something, go the opposite, do the opposite and see what happens. Like write the opposite thing. Let it just like whatever, if everybody else is going this way, you can go that way. And your odds of like jumping up ahead are higher than you think. Like you don't just have to copy the stuff that's there. It's like you really don't. You really don't. We can talk about, yeah, this is actually, I really like this slide. Like I'll let you talk through this because this is your baby.
So I've been trying to put a Venn diagram up summarizing what SEO is all about. And if you've been following me for a few years, you'll be, this kind of looks familiar, but it keeps changing. So this is where I've currently landed at is it's the first, your SEO and, you know, SEO driven content marketing, you basically want it at the intersection of three main components. So the first section is, what do you stand for? You know, what is your point of view? You know, what is the narrative? And, you know, what is the brand all about? What do you want to bring to the world? The second circle is your audience. Why do they search? Like, what are they trying to achieve? And help them achieve this goal. People have been very scared about, you know, short time on page, bounce rate, and all of this stuff. But what you basically want to do, you want to help them to complete the task. If they go to search, they type something in, they come to your website, they find it, and then they search something completely different, that's a good thing. You're fine. But you want to help them complete the task, complete the aim out of which they've been searching. So give them what they want. And then the third part is the more technical part that we as SEOs typically put a lot of time thinking about, which these are the ranking factors, the keywords, the 2,000 words worth of content. And that is still important. It's part of the equation, but it's just one of the three parts of the success equation. Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because Gen AI shows up in this. I know we're talking about content creation right now, but from an SEO standpoint, there are some new tools like SEMrush released its Gen AI recommendation engine. You know, when you go in right now, if you're a very data oriented person, you don't have any trouble making your way around these SEO tools. But the new tools kind of bubble up in natural language, like explaining to you, here's what we recommend that you do. So there's other ways even too that this can help. Like, it's not just about making the stuff, you know? So like keep kind of playing with it. Okay, this is another one where you and I often wind up intersecting and working together, which is like, and it answers a question that someone had in the chat over about, they said, how can content creators balance the need for AI-driven SEO optimization with the necessity to maintain authentic, engaging content that resonates with human audiences? And these things, y'all, are not in competition, and I will let Viola tell you why.
Okay. This is an article that, you know, our agencies have collaborated on, which is this idea of revamping a piece that was a kind of like regular SEO article. So previously, this was an article about performance improvement plans, and it was the most typical SEO article that you could imagine. What is an performance improvement plan? How to implement one? How to write one? Best practices. Nothing necessarily wrong with that, but not necessarily particularly original. And then this article was rewritten in August 2023 with a counter-narrative opinion. So one of the ways to kind of like bring experience and thought leadership to an SEO piece. And the way it was written is performance improvement plans, why they don't work, and what to do instead. And the article kind of goes like, this is how people traditionally thought about performance improvement plans. These are the challenges and shortfalls, and this is what you want to do instead. And the nice thing about this is it's much closer to align what the company and a CEO stands for and talks about, you know, in webinars and press mentions, but also it's getting rewarded by Google. And so you can see it ranks for a lot more keywords now. It gets a lot more traffic now. So it's a win-win and kind of like emphasizes what I've already believing, that point of view is SEO in 2024.
Mm-hmm. Look, how do you not click on that? I mean, if you're listed, give it a list of like things are performance improvement plans, like, what is performance improvement plan, which is the thing we've had to make, for ages. No, why they don't work. I'm clicking on that. Give me that contrarian view, and that's how you want it to be. We talk about including, how do you make this point of view content? And then I can get into sort of some of the tactics of how you make it and how you actually use AI to help. But totally. What does that mean? Tell me when you say experience, context, and opinions, what does that mean?
So maybe I go very quick on this and I'll let you speak about this more. But the main idea with this is raw information alone is not valuable. There's so much information already on the internet. There's so many how-tos. There's so many step-by-steps already. So what you want to have is like an expert interpretation of the information or data to provide actual insight. And so that could be the counter-narrative opinion that we just saw. Mm-hmm. And then also, typically, SEOs have been very scared of citing their sources. This time has gone. Yes, you can place an outgoing link, but you want to back what you're saying, with research and facts.
Okay. Again, What is it? Originality, point of view, and you talk about subject matter experts, case studies, industries report. I look at this as what are the things that only you can make? Because one of my rules when we're working on content and content strategy and what I call that content value proposition, right? Because people will put enormous amounts of work and spend tons of money on their value proposition for the business, for the product, and then they will then go make content that is exactly like everything else, right? So you need a content value proposition. And the test I have for that, if you have, is if I took your content and I dropped it on your competitor's website, could anybody tell the difference? And if you need to make content that can pass that test. And that, what's wrong with your performance management plans, what's wrong with them and what to do instead, absolutely passes that test. That particular company, none of their competitors have a piece of content like that. It would only come from them because of their CEO and the very public stance that he took. I haven't seen anybody else at any of the other competitors come out and say that. So strive for that. Even in your case studies, strive for what makes it different. Strive for look for the things you disagree on, right? If it to be thought leadership, it's like we always say, step one, have thoughts, and step two, lead, which means be willing to put them out there. And if a smart person in your industry can't disagree with what you're saying, it is not thought leadership. It's not. It has to be on the edge. Otherwise, it's just meh. So talk to me about this.
So this is just a funny one. This is kind of it's industry gossip. But Ryan Law, who was the CMO at Animals, which is a very well-known content marketing agency that took a big stance on thought leadership, unique opinion. I've learned a lot from him. Now works for the SEO tool Ahrefs and publishes SEO content that's deeply grounded in thought leadership. So I'm just putting it out there. If you don't want to take my word for it, why do you think Ahrefs hired someone like Ryan Law to drive their SEO content right now?
Mm-hmm. All right. And then AI writing. To do
Let's
it.
Fight.
To do it. It's not just a fight. It's a yes and. So it's a yes and. So when you talk about use cases, what in your mind are good use cases?
Perfect. So number one, I would say is programmatic SEO. And I wrote there the real stuff. So over the last 12 months, people have been using the word programmatic SEO as a way to describe, I'm putting 200 AI generated pages out. What programmatic SEO really means is that you have a templated type of page and that you're filling with content. So when you think about Zapier and all of their integration pages, if you're thinking about G2 and their category pages, that I would say is a classic programmatic SEO play where you have a template for these category pages that you fill over and over again. I think this can be a good one. Glossary SEO, short, quick, sweet descriptions. Obviously, a lot of the busy work that comes with SEO, page titles, meta descriptions, if you're a poor headline writer like myself, should really be doing that, tweaking a landing page, tweaking your ad copy for ads. And so we've been mainly using AI here as a way to be faster and more effective and reduce the kind of busy work. I've personally also liked ChatGPT more so as an editor. So helping me to kind of keyword optimize a page, optimize for readability, break down sentences, etc. I've enjoyed it a lot. And what you can do there is you can teach it with what Google calls the search quality rater guidelines. So that's kind of like a long PDF in which Google describes what they consider helpful content. And so you can basically train your ChatGPT editor on that. And then it can help you edit the article. What I said is not use cases, and I'm very curious on your yes and is I've typically found getting a counter-narrative opinion, it's not out of the box good at. And so typically when I do want a unique stance, I've been having to talk to people inside the company first to know what the unique stance is, and then use AI to help me, write about it. Mm-hmm. And I also think some of the core pages that are so most visited, I probably would want to work on that, quote unquote, by hand or AI assisted as well. I probably wouldn't want to spit that out just by AI. Mm-hmm. But this was before I knew there's a really good way to get thought leadership content from AI. So Mary Helen, please take it away.
So when you you hinted at it too, you absolutely can use AI to create some of those examples, but you have to think about your source material, because it's all about what you put in your prompt. So you can use AI to write first drafts of thought leadership if they're based on your weird content, right? So for example, when this webinar is over, I can take this transcript and I could have it write up a blog post that is about your perspective on some slice of this, right? It could actually be pretty good at that. Even more interestingly, recently, so we use Otter AI for our transcription for all of our calls, and they've recently added the ability to use Gen AI and a search engine across every call you've ever had. And since I've been using it for almost like 3 years, I went in and asked it, like one of our clients, I said, what does John think about AI in HR? Mm. And it searched everything that John and I had ever talked about.
Wow.
And came back with a pretty decent summary of his point of view. And then I said, cool, Otter, write me a 500-word guest article for HBR based on John. And it did it. It actually, I know, would I go publish that? Would I hand it over? Absolutely not. I would actually still go find some research, because it didn't bring that in. It didn't bring in some, but it was an 80% draft. And it was absolutely Gen AI, but it was Gen AI drawing from his real perspective, and he has strong viewpoints and they're interesting, right? The other thing that you can do is take all your messy data. You can actually use the Gen AI to pluck out trends, because you said no trends content. And I'm like, nah, actually, I can find trends before other people know about them. So take it a step back, okay? Second, if even product and service pages, I actually would argue that the best way to write these is to actually, you are a bad writer of your own product and service pages, because the number one risk in markets, people are boring. Number two is that they talk about themselves too much, right? And the perspective you inherently have, no matter how, even as a product marketer, is you are going to see it through the lens of I'm describing my product. This is what we want to tell you. You know what? If you've been recording calls, you've got things in Gong, or you recorded a tool like, Otter, why don't you go ask your customers? Right? Why don't you go see what, you can ask them, what are the pain points that come up the most often? Not only can you stop guessing, because in the past we used to come and say, we guess and we test stuff, but you can actually go ask them. Now you're using Gen AI to do something that was not possible. Use the voice of your customer. That's how I like to use it.
I love this, because quick comment is, I think we're 100% on the same page about this. I just think you're significantly smarter at this than I have been until 5 minutes ago.
Until 5 minutes ago. Until this call, until we prep for this call.
But because what I would do with this is, I'm like, okay, I need a kind of narrative opinion on performance improvement plan. Let's go to the internal subject matter expert. Let's ask them about this. And then, let's write the thing. And what you're just telling me is you still want to go to the internal subject matter expert. But that doesn't necessarily mean you need to steal their time and schedule a whole thing with them. You're taking the material that you already have recorded from them, extract their opinion. And so I think we're 100% on the same page. And this is an incredibly smart way to go about this from an operations perspective.
As a journalist, again, I mentioned at the very beginning that I was a journalist by training, not just to brag, although I am really proud of having worked at the Washington Post and the work that we've done and my colleagues over the years. But I'm not a journalist anymore. I realize I do bring a lot of the same ways of thinking in my work habits. And I had somebody ask me in an interview, a podcast interview, Josh Linkner asked me what skills I transferred over. And I think he thought I was going to say writing. But then in that moment, I was like, no, it's actually doing interviews. Because writing, Gen AI took writing from me. I don't really use it to do my writing. I don't use it to do my thinking. I use it to do my typing. But what it really unlocked for me is like, I've got a lot of interviews. I'm good at asking questions of people and getting them to say things and open up. But it's like that had a limited utility before. You did it once, you took some notes and it went somewhere. But because I've got these recordings for years, that unstructured, that data like is now valuable. And I could go write something, you can pull from that. But like, so I have this up here is like, what we're not going to do is sit down and chat GPT and type, write me a 1,500 word SEO blog post, about content marketing and AI. This is terrible, right? This is terrible. Do not do this. But what we could do, like say, for example, this webinar, when it's over, I could absolutely take this transcript, like take this recording and ask Otter to summarize, the highlights of the conversation. I could summarize it and say, Otter, what did Mariella and Viola disagree about? It can find that for me, right? Like, because that's going to find like kind of some of the juicy bits. I mean, look, we really do overlap like 90%. We're kind of always adding on to each other's work, but that's where it gets good. So like, if you're still thinking about it like this, in this really generic way, it's not gonna work. This isn't original, but go get it from your phone calls. Like go get it from, other things you're doing, like get it from your executives. Like that's how you do it. So we could talk about what does this mean? Like, so to me, this is maturing, right? So I'd say we are taking you from like, I'm writing my blog post, like, or I'm just adapting. I always tell people the baby steps, or I wrote a big long blog post and like a big report. And then I asked it to go take those things and turn that into a series of posts. Like, that's good. Like, do that first. That's where you get started. Somebody asked where you got started. It's adapted content. Take things in your existing brand that you already feel really good about and turn it into derivative content. Yeah. Every blog post can become a carousel. Like, I mean, there's all kinds of, it was well-structured to begin with. In fact, AI loves well-structured source material like that. Like if you give it a report I'll also tell you AI, the old school SEO blog post, like where you've got, because SEO content, great SEO content is inherently very structured. It was made to appeal to an algorithm to begin with. So if you hand it over and ask the algorithm like what to do with it, it'll cut it into carousels. It'll cut it into blog posts. And that is the easiest thing for it to digest. And it's like, that's your training wheels. After that, you can use it to make outlines. You can use it to brainstorm. You can use it to make yourself new headlines. But then you get into that third element, what I was just describing. I call that freestyle. Like where I'm like, I'm going to take this data set and I'm going to put it with this data set. And then I'm going to see what happens. Right. But anyway, let's talk about software, because software comes up a lot.
I love that. Quick question, Mary Ellen. I think typically we're supposed to meet end in the next 3 to 5 minutes. I know it looks like we have a lot of slides. A lot of these are screenshots. So curious, definitely want to talk about software a bit. Is it worthwhile to talk about reporting for a second as well? Like,
yes, let's actually, software we can always pick up.
Yeah, maybe.
There you go. Well, come back later. We'll talk about building your own GPT. That's its own.
Yeah, by the way, love that. So yeah. I think one of this is kind of like final thoughts. And this feeds to a question that Lauren had in the chat, which is this idea is like, what do we do with declining click-through rate and all this stuff? And I think what we have to acknowledge is, I think the next few months are going to be incredibly messy. I think we will need to over-communicate both what responsible AI usage means and also what AI-powered search really means, because we have a lot of data gaps. Taking a few screenshots, right? Like, how do we track if your company gets mentioned in ChatGPT? How do we track if it gets mentioned, on the search generative experience, on Microsoft Copilot and all of this stuff? So it's getting really messy, because I think downstream we'll have solutions for that. I'm sure there's going to be a LLM mentions listener of sorts. Like, I think there will be solutions downstream, but right now we just know this is very qualitative. It has a lot to do with testing and checking. There's not a super good structured way to track that yet. And I think what was interesting is Rand Fishkin published a study on who is sending the most traffic to websites. And Google is far and foremost the biggest winner. But OpenAI, it's creeping up there. Right now, it's all the way on the bottom of the list. But we know this will be different moving forward. But with all of this stuff, I just think the classic SEO idea of like tracking keywords and ranking positions for one URL is not the way forward. So I really want to drive home that point is you want to have visibility in every SERP feature, no matter the SERP feature, the chatbot answer, the image, the video. You want to be there, even if it's a 0-click search. People also remember you from scrolling on LinkedIn, even if they don't click. They're also going to remember you from scrolling on Google, even if they don't click. And so you want to touch point and you want to be part of where the conversation happens. So that's kind of like, it's messy. There's no good answer on how we're going to track this over the next 6 months or so. I don't think. I think keyword rank tracking is losing, and I've not liked keyword rank tracking for the last few years, but it's losing its importance even more. But what I like a lot is also this is from Rand Fishkin and kind of like probably continues on what Mary Ellen and I have talked about this is thinking about your search marketing as a component in a more holistic marketing strategy and story. And making sure that there's an alignment between what are you putting out on your socials, on your podcast, not just in terms of like the profile description. That's probably the very SEO-y start, but just be aware that on socials and all these channels, they might not be the top traffic drivers, but this is where people go to spend time, discover what's new, where they get inspiration, where they get keywords, and then they punch it into Google or the new AI-powered tools, to find more about it and get to the website. And so I think that hasn't fundamentally changed. And whilst click-through rate and tracking will be messy the next 6 months, like keep in mind that this is what we're doing. We want to get remembered, we want to be talked about, and we want to be talked about and remembered for the right stuff. And we want to have an alignment across these things. Mary Ellen, what would be your closing kind of like remarks on this beast?
Mine is going to be, don't get closer to your customer. Okay. Don't use this to hide and get away from and avoid that work, right? Like it's an incredible productivity enhancer, but even more importantly, these tools do give you a way to create content that speaks more directly to that target person that you really want to read this. Like, remember who you're serving. Like, and I love how you're like, you want to solve a problem for them. Write your content, create your content to solve the problem. And I hate this because I realize, Viola, we're going to have to come back and do another session because you know what we never talked about that is actually my favorite SEO play right now in content? It's video.
Yes. Yes.
And it's specifically YouTube. And you remember whenever they have like that page where everybody's stuff is getting pushed down, it's YouTube is one of the things that's pushing it down.
YouTube is so incredibly high up in search, especially on mobile. This morning, I recorded a video about B2B SEO because I was bugged by the guy who's ranking with this video for B2B SEO. So please, go to YouTube. I'll send you the video. Watch my video. I need to outwatch this guy, but yeah, 100%. Because video used to be so common in how to braid my hair type of stuff. We're used to seeing video there. I think for the more technical topics and that we've been working on in SaaS, not as much. And now you will see that for a lot of the HR stuff, MarTech stuff, revenue tech stuff, there's videos now everywhere. Even for B2B SEO, B2B SaaS SEO agency, there's no videos ranking. And so again, you want to be part of page one, no matter the SERP feature. And sometimes that means it's a video or an image, and so that's really, really important. Is like, we need to stop thinking about that one blue link. We need to find the medium that is like appropriate for that search query.
And if you can talk about it, I mean, people also enjoy watching content like that. I think that's what I'd like to put that there, something for us to come back. And I think we have to do a whole other webinar on that.
Yeah, let's do one on YouTube and YouTube SEO, both ranking in YouTube and ranking YouTube videos in Google. I think that would be a great session.
That would be a good one. That would be, because it is very, it does require a different mindset. But I guess we'll make sure people remember that the second largest search engine in the world is in fact YouTube, right? And the other really quick question, I'm 4 minutes over, but the other thing I would love to come back and maybe even talk about is where pay-per-click fits into this. Because I mean, you also do as an agency, y'all do handle that stuff. So I mean, is the solution while people figure out the organic piece of this, should they just pay their way out of it? Like, where does my ad go? Is my ad still at the top?
Ads are still on the top. Ads are still on the top in the AI-powered search in Google. Not always, but you often see 2 or 3 ads and then, you know, the search generator for experience answer. I'm very curious when we're going to start seeing ads within LLMs, like within ChatGPT or within, you know, Copilot, et cetera. Like, it hasn't really happened yet. But if we think about most platforms and how they're monetizing, I don't think we should rule out that ads will move into these sort of platforms as well. So, but yes, I think in general, it's something to think about. I mean, ads are very expensive. They got more expensive over the last few years. A lot of clients I see hyper focusing on bottom of the funnel transactional terms for ads because top of funnel stuff still can be quite pricey. But yeah, it's definitely something to consider. Like, how does your ad strategy complement a potential drop in click-through rate in organic?
I mean, that's one way you can buy your way out, like while you figure the rest of this out. Like, you could buy your way out of trouble for a short time. Don't do this forever. Like, it's not sustainable. But I do think these things go together. It's part of that little ecosystem. All right. Well, now we're 6 minutes over, but I think we know what our homework is now for the next webinar. So if y'all have any other questions, any other topics that you would really like for us to discuss, you know, with a rep cap, I can come in. You know, we talked about AI and thought leadership. We've, you know, done things on, I think we have another guest I'm chatting with about coming to talk about LinkedIn content. You know, again, there's AI all up in my LinkedIn now too. But we are, you know, I can have Viola come back and we can talk about YouTube. But any other questions y'all have, any other suggestions, like, you can find both of us. I think we should drop our LinkedIn platform.
I think Grace has already shared.
Oh, Grace has already done it because she's like taking care of us. So let me know if you have any questions. Thanks, everybody, and have an awesome rest of your day. Thank you, Viola.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. And please say hello.
Bye.